Dzień dobry Państwu.
Good morning, everyone.
Może najpierw się przedstawię.
Maybe I'll introduce myself first. My name is Michał Francuz. I came to you from the *�𝐃𝐙 𝐀𝐿 Academy of Music in Poznań.
Bardzo dziękuję
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Było dzisiaj już
There have been many very wise and interesting words today regarding artistic life, regarding work on a piece. And I think the topic I wish to present to you, the romantic toposes, as a source of interpretational inspiration, may not sound the simplest, but it's actually quite a trivial topic, but I think it's worth noting. So, what is a topos? You see, it's a statement accepted in a given culture without proof, serving as the basis of argumentation, ready for use, a widely known argument with great persuasive power that can be applied to proving any thesis. A timeless constant in literature, appearing in identical signs, motives and formulations. I think we can say that a topos is simply a character. It's a reference to what was once, and surely topos is a source of compositional inspiration, and I think it should be our source of inspiration in the same way. Topos as a recurring motif which often appears within the literature and art of a given culture, such as the toposes of victory in culture, in literature, and in art in general. It could be the goddess Nike, for example, Nike. The topos of folklorism, which can be heard in almost all Frédéric Chopin's works, or almost all of them. Music can express it through motives that remain unchanged, although, of course, their forms change. And now my question to you is, do you notice the existence of toposes or musical characters at all? Do you pay attention when working on a piece that such inspirations can influence us, or not? I think such a brief interaction between us may be necessary. So what does it look like for you? Because, of course, I help a bit. In my case, for some time now, I've always tried to define the character in which a given work is, in which each fragment of a given work is. Because then, honestly speaking, in my case, working on the work goes much easier. Does it look the same for you too? I see a forest of hands. So maybe we'll move on. Who's this gentleman? Konstantin Floros. Konstantin Floros is a theorist who became famous, among other things, for his research work, delving into the works of, for example, Gustav Mahler, and laid the foundations of musical exegesis. Generally, Floros began to define characters, drawing attention to characters in music. For example, in Gustav Mahler's music, which he studied extensively, their characters were drawn from literature, from art, even from ancient art. And now, I think it's worth taking a closer look at Konstantin Floros. Of course, one typo slipped in. He was born in 1913 Thessaloniki, Greece, and died in 2012. I obviously didn't add that. Konstantin Floros was born in Greece and spent most of his life in Germany. He authored many publications on music history, conducted numerous musical analyses, wrote biographies of composers, including a very well-known monograph of Ludwig van Beethoven and Richard Wagner, for example. What was Floros most known for? Primarily for his innovative approach to musical analysis, where he combined formal analysis with historical context. He was probably the first figure of this format who truly delved into these topics. His works, of course, influenced the works of later musicologists. It's known that they gained recognition in wide academic circles. And now, I think we can move on to a very important tip for us, performers. Namely, the tables of Schubert, Handel, Berlioz, and Ertel. Now, I don't know if you agree with most of the terms you can see here. I think if any of you would like to speak on this matter, I will, of course, be very pleased. So, keys. When preparing any chosen work, I think the first thing we can pay attention to is the choice of key. The choice of key immediately helps us determine the character of the work and directs our work on interpretation. For example, C major. Of course, it personally reminds me of Mozart's Coronation Mass, so a solemn key. But according to the gentleman mentioned above, of course, pure, innocent, the joy of life. Berlioz's indication may be unpopular. C major key is serious, but deaf and dull. Personally, I completely disagree with this, although most of the indicated keys here have their reflection in compositional works. Is there any evident example for you? It could be Chopin's Sonata in B-flat minor, if I may suggest. So that you agree. Strong suffering, as well as dark irony, dull, hoarse, but noble, eccentric, dissatisfaction, suicide. Of course, these are very gloomy characters. Very gloomy characters. But I think that the funeral march is an excellent manifestation of that. So if you want, I encourage you to take a few pictures of these tables, as they can definitely be useful. Now, what can toposes give us? That is, characters defining character, defining inspiration. Above all, emotional expression. Musical toposes are often associated with specific emotions, moods. Of course, the table itself may suggest this. You can use toposes to express emotions contained within the work more deeply. For example, Chopin's Nocturnes are an ideal example. Creating the narrative. The narrative topos. I think we can take a closer look at these topos. If toposes are inspirations from other fields of art, here, literature, I think an important example are, for example, Adam Mickiewicz's ballads. Chopin drew heavily on Adam Mickiewicz's ballads. They were, by the way, the main inspiration. And the understanding of Adam Mickiewicz's work definitely helps in creating a coherent musical narrative. Musical toposes can act as cultural and stylistic reference points that help in interpreting various musical aspects of works. And now we can ask ourselves the question, where did these toposes actually come from? When were they created? When were they defined? The culmination point, of course, was the 19th century. That is the creation of program music and excellent development of program music. Program music which transformed from the correspondence of arts. Correspondence of arts. Which composer do you associate with this term? Once again, a forest of hands. All right. Wagner, let's say Richard Wagner.
Oczywiście,
of course, composers who worked at the time also tried their hand in many fields of art. An excellent example here may be Robert Schumann, who, as you probably know, tried his hand as a music critic, for instance. He published quite a lot of his works. So now, what might you consider to be the most popular toposes? There is certainly the folkloric topos. There may be the topos of grief, the topos of a wanderer, which also has a reference in literature. Besides the musical characters themselves, does symbolism also come into play? Symbolism, that is, we can determine the musical motives here, the convergence of intervals. This can be seen, for example, in Brahms' work, in the topos of lament. I think the concept of topos, simply understanding the topos itself, can greatly help us when working on a piece. So, do you have any experience in searching for musical characters? Is it something you do? Someone shyly speaks up.
Nie.
No?
Dobra.
All right.
Tak.
Yes.
Jego praca o Chopinie była Biblią, która jest inspiracją do poszukiwań i Chopina, i też przenoszenia na inną literaturę muzyczną. Oczywiście, że interpretacja integralna nie chodzi...
Of course, integral interpretation is not just, for example, E flat minor or D sharp minor. They also sound different today. Does it really have an impact to the fullest extent? You can analyze it that way, come to some important conclusions, but it seems to me to be one of many aspects of work. It's like the source from which we start. Yes, however, we still have to some extent, consider the composer's intentions. It's known that in romantic music, programmatic romantic music, we have indeed a somewhat easier situation. Of course, I'm not just talking about piano music, I'm talking about symphonic music, vocal music, where songs are an excellent example. There was also a very well-known example of Richard Strauss's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which referred to Nietzsche's works, the philosopher's works on suffering, for example. But we have to realize that the topic has been already addressed several times, of course, that in order to fully exploit it, also filter it through our own experience and through the times we live in, I think it's essential to generally reach the world's art in the broadest sense. Therefore, without knowledge of literature, without knowledge of painting, without knowledge of the whole spectrum of art, we have a very difficult task, especially in today's times when everything is at our fingertips. As a colleague mentioned earlier, we can work on a piece quite quickly and effectively. Do you have any questions? Okay. I only have a question regarding this table. How relevant is this in our tuning system now, when we have A440, even 441, and when we simply translate it to those earlier times? Can we just leave it like that? Because somehow all these designations came from somewhere. For example, D flat major, somewhere I see quiet happiness, for example. Well, that's a very, very valid question. Of course, I think this problem also occurred earlier as the performance practices of, for example, Baroque music are known where the tuning is 416, although also 466. I recently heard St. John's Passion in this tuning. So the color and timbre of the sound change dramatically. It's known that now, in these times, you can look at it with a slight wink. Although these are the tables that were adapted to romantic tuning. So I think the mere choice of keys in the works of Mendelssohn, Strauss, Chopin can be compared one to one. I have a question from the audience. Yes. Precisely. If I may address this, I think by necessity there must be some kind of generalization, right? Of course, because it concerns many composers. But indeed, if we wanted to analyze, I don't know, even the D-flat major tonality in the work of Frédéric Chopin, we will see Nocturne in D-flat major, opus 27, the middle part of the Nocturne in B-flat minor. The middle part of the Funeral Margin Sonata in B-flat minor, opus 35, and this key indeed carries some kind of maybe similar emotions or similar expression, and certainly some special color. But does it relate to other composers? That's the question. If I see A-flat major here, death, grave, last judgment, I wonder what piece comes to mind in A-flat major. Maybe Widmung by Schumann? The song in A-flat major indeed talks about grave and death, but mainly about love. So, I think it's such a broad, extensive topic. Yes, we have to remember that, firstly, most of these indications were created by theorists. We also encounter this problem now when the works of theorists are not entirely accurate with our practical experience. However, in many cases, it can also be treated as inspiration or an idea. We have to assume that both now and 100 years ago and 200 years ago, some theories were mistaken. Therefore, this can and should serve as a help. Because music is so alive that certain things can be interpreted completely differently by everyone. And now moving on to the conclusion. In solo or chamber performance, why is chamber performance included? Since I'm also a chamber musician, the topic is close to me. Toposes can often be used to create a narrative, that is, as a help. This requires performers to convey these programmatic elements through music. But of course, returning to the presentations by previous speakers, without technical work, this is of course impossible. It is still just an aid. Ladies and gentlemen, finishing my brief lecture, I think toposes, not only romantic ones, generally characters, ideas, inspirations, are there to help us realize a certain vision, maybe help create a certain vision. And here's an appeal to you in this room and to those of you participating in the stream to expand your knowledge regarding art. Don't just focus on music, because it's one branch only. I think the knowledge of art in general will help us achieve our goals as performers. Thank you very much. Thank you, and at 12 we invite you to open lessons with designated lecturers. Thank you.